Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into this edition of Unidentified History. Very happy to have everybody here today to check out this episode. And I am your host, the lawyer Dave Unger, coming to you here today on this lovely Sunday afternoon. And I have with me a very special guest today, Samuel Chong. Now, Sam has been, you've probably seen him making some appearances on various podcasts. You've seen him on that UFO podcast with Andy McGrillen. You've seen him on Anomalous, oh gosh, I'm the one with Dale, Anomalous Observer Phenomenon. I'm getting it wrong, and I'm going to be upset with myself about that. You've seen him on UAP Files as well, and I'm going to actually look up Dale's to make sure I don't butcher that completely. But Sam is a licensed California attorney. He's a translator. So it's kind of just, Samuel's just a couple of California attorneys talking about UFOs and UAPs on a quiet Sunday afternoon. Welcome into the show. Thank you so much for being here. And how are you doing today?
Good, very good, Dave.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you were able to come on the show today. And we've got some really fun stuff to talk about, some interesting topics to cover, a lot of discussion about a book that you are a very big proponent of, and we're going to get into that in just a moment. But so Samuel, let me start off kind of getting some background information on you. I know you were born in China, correct? I think you were born in Beijing. Is that correct?
Yes.
You were there till I think like 1983, but when you were younger, when a young man, how did you get interested in the topic of UFOs and UAPs and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I was there until 1993, actually. And then why was in the 1980s, I actually was fascinated by the UFO magazine that was very popular among the elementary school students in China, which I was an elementary school student. So we discussed about the anomalies in the sky and also the possibilities of ETs. There was one story which fascinated me. It was reported without any source that someone like an engineer or physicist was taken by the ETs to their spacecraft and was told that even though Einstein laid the three fundamental principles of modern physics, he made a very small mistake, resulting in people like us believing that we cannot go faster than speed of light, in which they're able to. So that fascinated me because I was thinking if the ETs can come and visit us, they must have advanced knowledge and technologies, and we can just learn from them. So I was very interested in learning everything about ET contactees.
Yeah, and we'll talk about some of the technology involved when we get in more detail about the book. But I'm just like, in the show, Dale show Observer of Anomalous Objects there. I finally looked it up and got it right. So sorry, Dale, didn't mean to butcher the show title that badly. But as you're growing up in China, so you're there till 1993. And I know obviously the culture in China is significantly different than it is here in the States, but were there any like pop culture influences or movies? Or, I mean, you mentioned the magazine, UFO magazine, which was a big influence, but was there anything like, like movies, television shows, documentaries, or anything like that that kind of furthered your interest in the topic?
Some of the fairy tales of the Chinese culture, like the Journey to the West, Sun Wukong, the Monkey King, and then he was able to perform a lot of the magics or supernatural abilities, such as going to another location with one posture jump. And then a lot of things that actually I later discovered that the Taoist masters can perform with practice. The psychic abilities of the descriptions in the book. And there were a lot of cartoon shows over there and also documentaries, not necessarily on the UFO subject, but on the Qigong masters. That actually is something that the government doesn't allow anymore. But in the 1980s, especially in the late 80s and early 90s, the government allowed those documentaries to be shown and broadcast in China.
Okay. Yeah. And I know like on other shows, and we'll get into it later, like you've mentioned on other podcasts that kind of the Chinese government, as time has gone along, have steered more into censorship as opposed to kind of letting things flow. But we'll get into that a little bit later on. But I did want to talk about it, and for the people listening, I mean, I want to talk about this book, the Thiaoouba Prophecy, and I think I'm actually pronouncing that pretty close to how it actually is, because I know it sounds a lot like Jehovah, so it's Thiaoouba, the prophecy. It's this wonderful book that, and I have to thank you publicly for you implored me to read the whole thing before we actually talked, and I'm really glad you did that because getting through the book was well, it's a page turner. It really is, and it will make you think. And I've got some thoughts as we go along. But why? I guess what about the book appealed to you when you first discovered it, and why do you feel so strongly that this is a work of nonfiction? Because I know when it was published as science fiction because that was just the way it was categorized, and because there's stigma everywhere about this topic. But what about the book when you read it appealed to you so much and made you think that this is actually a true story? This is not a work of science fiction. This is something real.
Is the specific verifiable facts contained in the book. The book was written in 1989, but published in 1993. A book written before the age of the internet, before internet went to Australia. Like the author was living in Cairns, Queensland, Australia at that time, and then he didn't even know how to type computer on a computer, and he had no college education. He did not really know a lot of the things that's mentioned in the book. For example, it talks about plate tectonics, the drifting or shifting of continents over time. It talks about archaeology, talks about physics, chemistry, religion, and also all the different subject matters like reincarnation that really resonate to my heart. And also, I was able to verify later on from modern scientific research papers. So this book is amazing that it's way ahead of the time. And is really something that's for people nowadays to consider fully what's written in the book and what's being communicated to him by the ETs.
Yeah, and I think like that was one of the things that I had kind of thought as well, Samuel, was and it ties into the author. So the author is a gentleman by the name of Michel Desmarquet. I think he's French Australian and that sort of thing. So he wrote the book, and you met him on a couple of occasions. So I guess where I'm going with this is I want to ask you, what was Michel like, and his general intellect level, because there's so much in the book that, do you think, and I'm not saying this to be mean or anything like that, but do you think he had the writing skill that would have been required to create, either it's a really good work of science fiction or it's something else, strongly suggesting that he had help from the Thiaoubans in constructing this tremendous book that he did. So I'm just kind of wondering from you, what was Michel's general intellect like? I know he's a good chess player. Yeah, I know you're going to tell me that, but what was he like?
He is a very cynical person, sharp-minded and man of action, but he really doesn't have he didn't have the knowledge to write this book. And you can actually compare this book to two other books that he wrote later on, works of fiction, novels. And then if you compare this book with the other two books, and you're going to see the vast differences of the details and also the ways in which he portrays certain things. The other two books I'm not going to recommend because those are just just regular novels. They don't really get into my mind that much because they don't really sell well either. And it's just this book is very unique. It really something that's shocked me along the way that I was reading that.
So it's funny, like you indicate that when he tried to write fiction, he wasn't as effective at it as this work, which I mean, yeah, we'll get into it. I mean, a lot of people who are going to read this are going to say, "Oh, this is science fiction and that sort of thing," and it really, and as we'll discuss, it's not. But I think that's curious that when he actually tried to do something fictional, it didn't come out so well. Is that generally what you're indicating here?
Yeah, I mean, he tried it after this work was published. And then the other two books are just the regular. One is Nature's Revenge. The other is She and I. One talks about the environment. The other talks about abortion. So the other two books are not as good as this one. And they're on different levels. One is like written by someone like a college professor. And the other two books are basically just like written by someone who is maybe like a middle school student,
like fan fiction or something like that. Huh?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a big testament when you really look at and you read Thiaoouba Prophecy and the depth and the detail and just the painstaking detail that some of the descriptions are. That, yeah, I mean, I've read plenty of science fiction and lots of documentary type books, and I'm like, oh, this is really detailed and well. It was very well written. And from my standpoint, like you're saying, he wrote that in 1989, right? Is that when he wrote the book?
Yeah, he had an encounter in 1987 and got a book finished in 1989.
Yeah, and even the postscript that he did in the book is written in 1993. So this is all, it's important for people to understand. This is all before the advent of the internet. I mean, yeah, it was there, but not to the extent that everybody could access it, go on Google, grab whatever information. This is not the age of AI where AI could have written something like this. So the knowledge that is imparted in this book is really, it's impressive. And it leads me to believe that there's something else going on here for him to have such a detailed working knowledge of some pretty complex concepts and principles. So getting back to Michel, I think you met him in Vietnam twice. Is that correct? Can you tell us a little bit about that story?
Yes, so I was reading the book. I thought I had to find this author because in the postscript it says there are far more incredible things that he knew but wasn't allowed to write in the book because we were far from understanding them. So I was kind of a little bit arrogant and I thought that others might not be able to understand this, but I am probably able to do that. So I wanted to find him, so I tracked him down. I searched on the internet and found out that some tourists happened to meet him by accident. And they wrote like travel reports, like travel logs. So I contacted the tourists who accidentally met him and asked him like, where did Michel, like, where did he reside? Where was he living at? And then the tourists refused to tell me because he said that Michel was a very private person. He didn't really want him to reveal whereabouts of him. So I was kind of disappointed. So what I did was that I printed out a picture that the tourist posted on the internet that showed his bungalow. And then I flew to the island in which Michel was living at that time without knowing his exact address. Spent $2,000 on my own. That was a lot of money for me at that time. And then from Los Angeles to Vietnam. And then when I landed on the airport, and then I found a taxi driver, and I showed that bungalow picture, the picture of the bungalow to the taxi driver, asking him to get me there. And then he said, oh, I'm going to give it a try, but no guarantee. And then I said, okay, just give it a try. He found the right location. Yeah.
And I remember when you've indicated that when you first approached him, he wasn't exactly thrilled that you'd kind of tracked him down.
Yeah, I mean, he was very, very kind of annoyed at my visit. I wasn't really welcomed by him. He just asked him a lot of questions about book. He said, read it one more time. Everything is in the book. Read it one more time in his thick French accent. So I tried to befriend him over time, playing chess with him. That's how I wanted to distract him. And then he was still refused to tell me everything.
Right. And I think like you eventually, though, you helped Michel get the book published in the first place, or to well, not in the first place, but just to like I mean, he'd asked you about what was going on with the book being published in China, and I believe you helped him with that. Is that correct?
I did, because a Chinese publisher paid him $2,000 copyright fee, but never got the book published. It turns out that they were afraid of the Chinese censorship. They were going to lose their jobs if they got the book published in China. So Michel asked me to find a different publisher in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, in mainland China, or even Singapore. As long as it's published in Chinese language, then that would be okay with him. So I did, through personal connections, I got a book published as a science fiction in China and as a nonfiction in Taiwan.
Okay, and that explains the difference between how it was published in China and how it was published in Taiwan. You mentioned that when you went to him, you wanted to ask him about the stuff that's not in the book. And he says in the book that there's just aspects of the certain things that he was told that you can't tell anybody, or we can't tell you. We can't, or I don't know. Did they, let me ask you this. Was he told this forbidden information and he just, prevented from repeating it, or what impression did you get? Were you ever able to get anything out of him that wasn't actually in the book?
I did, quite a bit. And then the one thing that he mentioned in his postscript that I learned about during my second trip is something that's not allowed to be talked about publicly or privately to anyone, according to the instructions from the ETs to him and also his instructions to me. But he did tell me a lot of things not mentioned in the book. For example, he said that the Mars had people who lived on the planet before, about 1.35 million years ago. And the Tibetan people nowadays actually originated from Mars. This is one thing that's not mentioned in the book. The second thing was that I asked him, like, when you were on the planet Thiaoouba, from your observations, what did the people do most of their time? Like he said, meditation. And he also said that he personally observed them transferring information from one person to another, like without using any instrument. So they just get information or knowledge from someone else, just like downloads. And then he also mentioned a few other things, such as the Great Pyramid and also the Sphinx. He said that there are 3 chambers beneath the Sphinx that are yet to be discovered. Once we are ready, they can be opened. And once they're opened, everything will be known. So this actually corroborates with what Edgar Casey says about the Hall of Records. And he really didn't know about Edgar Casey. And I asked him about that. And he also mentioned about the Greys and the ETs who the government has been working with. He said that Greys are actually not that advanced ETs. They are also from a Category 1 planet. They did put implants on 150 people or so by the year 1993, just to observe us, to see how we respond to the same situation that they were in, which is the loss of our immune system gradually over time since 1948. The Greys have been losing their immune system as well, and they wanted to see how we respond to the same situation. So a few other things that he mentioned, which I find interesting.
Yeah, that's really, I mean, the stuff about Mars is fascinating because, you know, you see the face on Mars is one of those things that people have talked about for many, many years, you know, and a lot of the standard the more skeptical debunking aspect of the explanation is that, oh, it's just a geological formation. It's just a natural formation. But it sounds like he was telling you that there was a civilization there on Mars over 1 million years ago. And if that's true, then it really stands to reason that they left behind certain landmarks, certain markings and things like that. And I mean, what do you think? Do you think like the face on Mars and some of what has been rumored to be there on Mars are remnants of that civilization that he was talking about?
Yes, and he said there was a pyramid on Mars too. And also he actually drew a picture in one of the versions of the book published in China, comparing the pyramid on Lemuria and the pyramid in Egypt as well as the pyramid on Mars. He mentioned in the book that because the core of Mars cooled down over time, it no longer had the electromagnetic field to capture the atmosphere. So this is why Mars became a desert. And this is actually the reason why people migrate from planet to planet, because a planet has its lifetime or livable environment. So this is what he said.
I mean, that does tie in a lot to things that I've thought about as well. And we're going to get into, like you talked about, Category 1 planets, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. But I did want to ask you something about, I mean, one of the original titles to the book is Abduction to the Golden Planet, right?
To the ninth planet.
And to the 9th planet, right? And what did Michel think? I mean, when you hear the word abduction and you hear, you know, you relate it to the UAP phenomenon, it equates or it provides a certain sort of reaction that most people have. And a lot of people think it's more like a kidnapping sort of situation where you're taken against your will, things are done to you, and then you're brought back. And Michel's experience wasn't the way the impression I got from it was that Michel's experience really wasn't like that. There was nothing really negative about it. He didn't want to come back at the end of the whole thing. Did you guys ever talk about that? How he felt about the whole experience? Did he feel like he'd been abducted, or did he feel like he'd been given this incredible opportunity to learn things that most of us only dream about, being provided with knowledge like he got?
Well, it's a double-edged sword because he was provided with the knowledge, but no one believed him in the early as well as in his later years. He was actually very depressed. But in the very beginning, he was taken without his permission. So that's why the name Abduction, also to catch people's attention, to create a sensational feeling. But then after a while, he was really happy that he was chosen to be on this trip. And he really didn't want to come back. He forgot his families on Earth, or his wife, his children. And
Right.
after he came back, he was disappointed and really wanted to go back there. He was looking for Tao and her people to take him back. So this is why the picture that I shot photographed him. He was looking up, waiting for them to take him back. So this is, I think, probably one of the reasons he passed away 3 months after my second visit to him.
Yeah, it was. And how was his health? I mean, was he in good shape, or did his health decline at all after he was brought back? If you feel like sharing any of that information, I'm just kind of curious.
He was in a very good health the second time I visited him. So this is why I did not really ask him a lot of questions on my second trip, because I thought I would meet him for the third time, the fourth time, until many years
Yeah.
later. he believed he would live for a long time, but he passed away of stomach hemorrhage. And if you read carefully into the book, when he came back, he had some kind of strange feeling on the stomach when certain things happened. And I don't know if that's a connection or not.
Yeah, that's too bad. I mean, it'd be great if we could have had a chance to talk to him a few more times and you could have got more information out of him. Let's dig into the book a little bit here, Samuel. And I mean, I've got specific things I want to dig a little bit deeper with you because I've heard you talk about it and I've got my own questions for you that I want to explore. But just in general, can you give an overview for the people as to what is the Thiaoouba Prophecy about? What is this book about? And just the overview of what was happening in this tremendous story.
So he woke up in the middle of the night. He was taken by a group of highly advanced and civilized ETs, beautiful ETs who don't die at all, to their planet for 9 days and then came back. He brought a lot of knowledge about our ancient past, where we all came from originally, from different planets. The concept of reincarnation, the distortions in the ancient scriptures such as the Bible, different religions, and the real dangers on earth, including our politicians, money, and also other things. And also a lot of technology, information about technologies, such as anti-gravity, the effects of colors, and also antimatter guns, and things like the human energy fields. And also spirituality, and also some of the things involving different kinds of ETs, the creation of the universe, and different planets and different stars, animals, plants, and people, human beings, as well as the meaning of life, which is to learn through the challenges we all face to obtain spiritual lessons over time. And so gradually to move up the ladder to really reincarnate to another a higher category of planet. So he talks about everything that's the people from the curious about the paranormal want to know about.
And there's so much that is in this book that I want to kind of touch base. I grouped it in my own head as like, okay, what's kind of more space-based as opposed to the more consciousness-based spiritual sort of thing. The first thing I wanted to ask you about is the concept of the parallel universe that Thao, I think that's the main person or the main Thiaoouban that he's involved with, talks about that they picked him up from a parallel universe, and I wasn't quite sure what that meant in the book. And what do you think this means? Is this like a universe sharing the same space with us, or is this like a multiversal sort of thing that's like, you see it in the Marvel Cinematic Universe or DC or something like that, where there's multiple versions of the same universe. What did you think that meant when he talked about the parallel universe?
I think it's a specific space in which is different from ours, in which we can enter into. It's like you can enter into that parallel space using a portal or a warp. In that space, time stops and everything kind of like is very different from our space or our universe. It doesn't really necessarily connect to a different kind of like a universe. It's its own universe in which it floats in our space like ribbons in different locations, different locations on Earth or in space. So it floats around. So once you are not careful, you can be sucked into that space. And then once you're sucked into the space, if you don't know how to get out, you're forever stuck there.
Right. I think you made the correlation with that, like the Bermuda Triangle, and yes. And on this show, on Unidentified History, we talked about a few weeks ago, we covered Flight 19, the 5 planes that flew off into the Bermuda Triangle and they just vanished, right? No one knows what happened to them. Could have been mechanical failure. And it's so different from the other UAP-related cases because unlike those, there's no dispute that something happened there. 5 planes just disappeared. A rescue plane it vanished as well. There's lots of documented stuff like that in this Bermuda Triangle. And it makes me wonder, and I think you've mentioned it as well, is that one of these warp points? Is the Bermuda Triangle one of these warp points where if you're not careful and you're not heeding warnings like, magnetic anomalies and your compass pointing north when it should be pointing south, vice versa, that sort of thing. Do you think that's kind of like the Bermuda Triangle is one of these sort of warp points?
Yes, it is one of the warp points. And actually, there are a lot of warp points in the US and Canada, in China, in Eastern Europe, and in the world. If you look at the studies done by a private investigator, David Paulides, he actually documented strange cases in which people just gone vanish. And he actually know that they try to send rescue teams and search the places in which they wanted to find the corpse of the people. And then the corpse appear and reappear at places they searched previously multiple times. So it's evidence, circumstantial evidence that such portals exist in which people just go in and come out. And once if they're not careful, they die when they come out. And actually this explains a lot of the interesting phenomena in which the UFOs or UAPs frequently appear and disappear at the specific locations in space, in the sky, because the ETs know about this. They can take advantage of the portals to come in and get out of Earth so that we don't become paranoid or something.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it kind of ties into the speed of the Thiaoouban craft, which Thao was very careful to tell Michel, it was more or less like, don't worry about it sort of situation, because she never gives it away, except there's one point where you are actually able to calculate things. And it's when they're approaching Thiaoouba near that part where she tells Michel that, and I'm saying I know they're, and the Thiaoubans, it's important for people to understand they're hermaphroditic, right? So they have male and female properties, that sort of thing. And that's very well described in the book. But there's a part where at the end where they're approaching Thiaoouba and they're saying, okay, it's 848 million kilometers. It's going to take us roughly 25 minutes to get there. So, you use calculators and you can figure this out. It's 1.885 times the speed of light, which is going to make certain people's minds melt because there's a lot of people that think it's impossible. Can't go faster than the speed of light, which I don't believe that because, I figure a million years from now, people will have figured it out. But when the craft is actually going, and like you mentioned that they use antimatter guns to blow away the stuff that's in front of them to get it away from, because anything, even a microscopic of something, if you're going, say, 3 times the speed of light, is going to just be devastating. So they use the guns to get rid of all the debris and anything like that. But I guess what I'm wondering is when you're talking about the speed of the craft, do you think that they're using a anti-gravitic or some unknown form of propulsion? Is it a warp drive? Are they using wormholes? Or is it maybe a combination of all that that kind of ties into the warp points and the parallel universes that we were just talking about?
I think they use unknown kind of technology so that they can travel actually faster than the speed of light. And actually, Michel revealed one thing that's not written in the book, is that because you read the book, I can tell you more, so I don't. So that so they have to travel into deep space in order to teleport themselves to another location in deep space, and then travel at a few times faster than speed of light to their destination. So they're able to do that. Kind of, they have 3 kind of stages. The first stage is to travel into deep space. And then that, I don't know what kind of technology they used, but it's kind of a technology that's very different from ours, for sure. But then once in deep space, it is explained to Michel that they have to vibrate the spacecraft to the speed of light so that it disappears. And then they use the kind of a force to teleport the spacecraft, which is electrons now, and then to another location in deep space. So they're only able to do that in deep space because if they did that in another place, the spacecraft would have exploded. So this is the explanation given to Michel, and he didn't know why and how that was done.
I don't think anybody with our present understanding of physics is going to be able to grasp that. I mean, maybe some really smart people, if you said, here's the, like to steal from Star Trek, here's the formula for transparent aluminum, maybe they'll be able to reverse engineer it and that sort of thing. But yeah, what you're saying makes sense. And it is kind of like, I think somebody had meant in one of the other shows had talked about how Star Wars, when they go into a hyperdrive, we're going to go to light speed. They got to put the calculations in the Nava computer because you would bounce too close to a star or a supernova and that would be the end of it. So it does sound like they're using a form of propulsion combined with like jump points through the galaxy. Like maybe they've navigated certain places where you can go in, come out, and it really shortcuts the whole thing. I just thought it's fascinating to me, and the idea that people who say, well, it's just not possible. And I'm like, well, it's not possible based on our present understanding. But if you go to 1776 and you give your iPhone to somebody, they're going to think that's impossible, that sort of thing. So I've always thought it's just a little narrow-minded, and I suspect you kind of share that belief with me.
Yes, exactly. There are a lot of things written in the book that's so far ahead of its time. And this is probably why and the reason the book wasn't very popular in the past in the US. He actually came to the US, I think in the early 90s, and came on a few shows. And I'm trying to get the records or the videotapes, but failed. And people didn't buy it. I mean, people didn't really believe him at all. Even the ufologists in the US at that time.
Sure. I think between us, I get it. What he's talking about is going to be very difficult for a lot of people to grasp a hold. And even 2025 standards, it's still some of it is difficult. But if you're open-minded, and they say a lot of things that are going to resonate with a lot of people. One of those things I want to ask you about is the significance of the number 9. And you talked about a first level planet and how there are planets ranging from 1, which is Earth. And Earth is a level 1 planet, which is like kindergarten, right? Thiaoouba is a level 9 planet, which is like Harvard or Yale or some Ivy League school, that sort of thing. And then you've got the 2 through 8 in between that. And I guess I'm wondering, like, did the Thiaoubans give to Michel, or did he pass on to you, or what are your thoughts about those planets from 2 to 8? What do you think they're like, and are they the ones who've been coming to the Earth and not so successfully on occasion? Sometimes they crash. Sometimes things go wrong over here. There's lots of, the Thiaoubans aren't crashing. That we know that much. They're not the ones who are crashing. But these 2 to 8s, maybe not the 8s or the 7s or the 6s, but the 2 to 5s, maybe they're not quite as sophisticated as they need to be to deal with the primitives that we are and the things that we throw up there. So I was just wondering about your thoughts about that.
Yeah, so the Greys come from Category 1 planet, and their spacecraft crashed because they come from the same category as Earth, which they're not very advanced or at least spiritually or technologically compared to other ETs. And the Hebrews originally came from, this is not written in the book, a Category 3 planet. And so if you read the Old Testament of the Bible, you're going to see that the Hebrews used to live 800, 900 years. And they were highly intelligent. They're still highly intelligent and excel at all the different fields they enter into. For example, like this 0.2% of world population, the Jewish people, they account for more than 22% Nobel Prize winners. So this is a fact, statistics.
Yeah.
And if you look at the longevity of the Jewish people, they live longer than the rest of us. So this is like interesting fact that I uncovered just in the last few days or so. But if you look at some other, like the Thiaoubans come from a Category 9 planet, so they don't die at all. So they can live forever, and they're highly spiritual. They have all the abilities to perform miracles as performed by Christ. So they are able to handle everything in nature because they can actually play around the natural laws and to be in like part of nature. Actually, when I was translating the book, that sentence is actually very difficult to translate. So they are not part of nature; they're in nature. So you can see as well. Category 1, 2, 3, when they try to come to Earth, they may crash. But Category 7, 8, 9, they don't crash anymore. So I think we should learn from the masters.
Yeah, that's a really good idea to learn from the masters and that sort of thing. And the talking about the Hebrews and people who know me know that my culture, and I was born Jewish and that sort of thing, and I'm not. I don't go out there and practice all the time and that sort of thing. But I've got my own thoughts about my people and that sort of thing and what they do. And it is interesting how successful that they are in many different aspects of things. And so reading the book and realizing, oh, okay. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, about how maybe we are the chosen people after all, that sort of thing. And that's not to say that we're any better than anybody else on the planet. But it is interesting, all these different planets and these categories of planets that range. And I think, unless even Dr. Eric Davis, who talks about 4 different kind of species of aliens on the planet, lizard men, mantids, the Greys, the Nordics, and that sort of thing. And it sounds like, even from just reading through this, there's a lot more than that we may, even somebody as smart as Dr. Eric Davis may not even know about or have been introduced yet. And whether they've, bothered to come here and tried to make contact with us, or just kind of stopping in and looking around and saying, yeah, no, we're not going to stop here, that sort of thing. There's a lot of that going on, I imagine, right?
Yes, I think people have been focusing too much attention on the ETs whose spacecraft crashed in the US or elsewhere, and not focusing on the ones who actually have been leading us throughout human history, giving us nudges on certain things and certain aspects. And there are at least 147 different kinds of ETs or ET species just in our Milky Way galaxy. And if Dr. Eric Davis says that there are at least four, I mean, there are actually a lot more than four. And there are different kinds of ETs at different levels. And I think we should be careful and to really focus on learning from the ones that graduate from Harvard or Yale.
Yeah, let's focus on the ones who didn't crash and are actually out here, leading the way and guiding us and not making a mess of things. But you raise a really good point right there. Like everything that happens in the book, this is all in the Milky Way galaxy. And I think it's easy to forget just how massive the Milky Way galaxy is. I mean, people look to Andromeda and these other galaxies and think, I wonder what things are like there. But everything that's happening in the Thiaoouba Prophecy is contained within the Milky Way. This ultimate class of extraterrestrial and this ninth level planet that's here in the Milky Way. But I got to ask you, do you think that there's comparable sort of structure in some of these other galaxies? Like Andromeda is our closest neighbor. So it's easy to just kind of go there. Do you think there's a similar structure in galaxies like that?
Yes, there are similar structures in the different galaxies. Because the book actually talks very interestingly, and I haven't talked about this in a lot of the shows, is that there's a pattern of the universe in which astronomers haven't found yet, in which is 9 planets or 8 or 9 planets rotate around a star, and 9 stars rotate around a bigger star. And then the cycle goes on to the middle of the universe where everything started. So the cycle goes on and on. And so there must be other galaxies, just like the Milky Way galaxy, in which other planets exist, and then life forms exist. So I think we are limited by our imagination or technology so far.
Yeah, and it goes back to that number 9 being so prevalent throughout the book, and just kind of like the underpinning of this cosmic force in throughout the universe that kind of pins things together. Let's dive a little bit deeper into kind of the issues that I think that are more related, like consciousness, spirituality, religion, philosophy. There's a big section. The first planet that they go to, that Thao takes Michel to, is a planet. And I can't remember the name of it. Artemis or something like that.
Remo
What's that?
X3.
Yeah, right. And it's a planet that had their civilization basically wiped out by nuclear war, atomic energy, proliferation of nuclear weapons. There are scenes that are just like, it's like a hellscape in there. I mean, you're talking about, and you got to forgive me because I'm not so familiar with the metric system, but they describe what can only be imagined as giant nuclear infested cockroaches that are just coming out of structures, and the Thiaoubans have to basically, I mean, the people who are still there have been plunged back into the Stone Age, essentially. And these giant, horrific creatures are coming after them, and the Thiaoubans have to wipe them out. So I got to ask you, this is more on a personal level to you, Samuel. You look at the state of the world and what's going on, and do you think that we can avoid the fate of these prior planets and these civilizations who it almost seems like, and I think you've talked about this on other places, or maybe not, but it's maybe from the book, that there's a tipping point that once that atom is split, and all planets reach this point, right? That I think that was in the book as well, that they all get to this point where nuclear energy it's almost like the litmus test as to whether civilization fails and has to restart, or whether it maybe progresses to a second level planet and beyond. Do you agree with that? Is that what you got from the book, and what do you think? Do you think we're on the right or the wrong path right now?
Well, when a nuclear war happens or nuclear bomb explodes, it's felt everywhere in the universe because everything is connected holographically. If you read a work by Michael Talbot, The Holographic Universe, you're going to understand that everything is connected. This is why people have psychic abilities to communicate instantaneously with people on different planets, because they can bypass, it's a different form of communication that's not limited to the speed of light. So that's one thing. And the other is that the planet really doesn't change its category. The people change their level of spiritual development. When they reincarnate, they may reincarnate onto a different category of planet, such as category 3 or 4. And actually, Michel was degraded, or maybe he was living on category 7 planet before he came here. So this is what was told to him by the ETs. And I think, and also to the other question, we determine our future. So the future has many different probabilities. The past is fixed, as you know. You read the book, so you know. But the future is changeable depending on collective actions. So this is why I've been putting so much of my time and energy to form like an international grassroots movement so that people can wake up and to realize what's happening in the world or in their countries or in their localities. And don't be fooled by the financiers, the politicians who are actually controlled by the financiers or kind of a hidden hand or hidden organization or secret societies for that matter. So once people have the knowledge, they know how to respond to certain situations. And actually the book talks about that incident on Arceus planet, in which it only took about 4 people to change the government from a totalitarian regime to a democratic spiritual country. So it only took about 4 people to make the change. And I think it's doable. And this is the reason why the book actually talks about that. So it's doable on Earth. So we want to work towards that goal and that kind of scenario.
And I think it's interesting that we'll talk about the reincarnation and that aspect of things, but like, it's funny that if Michel was on a level 7 planet, like, I wonder why he would have said, yeah, let me go back to this level 1 planet, and I mean, unless there's some reason he had some unfinished business or something that he thought he needed to evolve in a different way. Did he ever elaborate on that to you as to why I won't say regress, but he had to make a conscious choice to go backwards?
There are a lot of rumors in which I didn't actually ask that question to him directly. So there are rumors why he actually came to be born on Category 1 planet, but I don't think it's credible enough for me to talk about it. However, if you read the book, you're going to know that Moses used to live on Category 8 planet and then came here.
And it makes sense that, and when we talk about Jesus and the astral being and what that whole, I don't want to spoil anything before we get to it, but I mean, it does make some sense. I think like what you were saying, that we need to learn from the beings and it's up to us, because a lot of people, and I'm sure you've heard the same thing, that, oh, well, the war will never happen because the ETs will save us from ourselves. And I'm like, and they get that because, okay, we know that UFOs shut things down at Malmstrom and Minot Air Force Base. We know they turned things on in Ukraine and the Soviet Union, that sort of thing. But I'm a firm believer, and this book really hammers this home, that we are the only ones who are going to save ourselves. They are not going to save us. They can guide us to a certain point, but there is definitely a non-interventional sort of law that they have to adhere to. They can do a few things, but something of that magnitude, the Thiaoubans are not going to save us from ourselves, because if we're going to evolve from a level 1 planet to beyond, it's got to be a decision that collectively we make on our own, don't you think?
Yes, we have to go through the struggling process on our own in order to learn the lessons, the spiritual lessons. It's just like the butterfly has to struggle in order to get enough fluid into the wings so that it can come out of the cocoon or the chrysalis so that it can survive and be able to fly. So people on Earth has to go through the same struggling process and learn the lessons in order to survive as a species in the universe.
Yeah, and they talk in the book a lot about prior civilizations, not just here on the Earth, but prior civilization, or actually a current civilization, for all we know, that's on the moon, on the dark side of the moon, that sort of things. They talked about the Great Pyramid in Egypt and it essentially it being like a power source. So I wanted to ask you about that, to kind of elaborate on that, and how does that tie into like some of the other pyramids around the world, or to places like, like what is Stonehenge? These really deep philosophical questions that people have had for eons. What's Stonehenge? What's the meaning of Easter Island? The Great Wall of China, is it more than just, or is it trying to keep something else out? That sort of thing, I just want to get your thoughts on that.
So regarding the Great Wall of China, is actually built by people on Earth who did not have the advanced technologies that I know. For the megalithic structures in Latin America and other parts of the world, there are actually the remnants of the ancient civilizations, the technologies that have been lost to us. If you look at the Great Pyramid of Egypt, according to this book, it was built 17,000 years ago by a very wise person from Atlantis called Thoth, and he built the Great Pyramid of Egypt. But you see that as days go by and the disappearance of Atlantis and the loss of the books from the ancient times, you're going to see that when people try to imitate the Pyramid of Egypt, they didn't have the advanced technologies anymore, so they could build smaller and smaller pyramids over time. It's just like it become more primitive over time, and because they didn't have the technologies anymore. So I think that's what happened. And we had actually two great resets in human history on Earth. The first great reset wiped out the entire civilization due to an asteroid hitting Earth, splitting 3 parts. One of the smaller parts hit the Galapagos Island west of Ecuador. If you do research, you can find evidence on that. And the second great reset was the disappearance of Lemuria, a continent that used to exist in the Pacific Ocean. So once that civilization disappeared, because they didn't really pass down their technologies to the rest of the world to keep their advantage over other people, gradually people lost the knowledge.
Yeah, and the book does talk about the two big resets and that sort of thing, and it does tie into a lot about how there's these remnants of technology, like the Great Pyramids are one of the greatest examples of that. They're so flawless, and I know Dale talked about how when you're actually inside the pyramids, it's very claustrophobic, but at the same time, the skill and technology that went into like putting those together, that even by modern standards, people you'll hear people talk about, by modern standards, could you replicate the pyramids? And even the best builders in the world would be like, man, that'd be really tough, that sort of thing. So it's like, well, how does that work then? People who are allegedly in the Stone Age had all this massive technology and were able to do these amazing things all these years ago, unless, like you're saying, they were at least as advanced as us. And then the whole world, it's like a video game. You hit the reset button and start over, that sort of thing. Is that kind of what happened?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what happened. And the Great Pyramid actually had underground or subterranean structures that we discovered nowadays that were used to confirm or validate that it was built as an energy center, as a tool for the pharaohs to communicate with people on different planets and also to make rain. And it's true that we actually had the Great Resets. And if people are interested, the first Great Reset occurred 1.32 million years ago, in which we tried to escape from the natural disaster. And then a spacecraft or like an aircraft actually crashed and in Greenland. I don't know if we just go to Greenland if we are able to find any evidence of that, but that's actually a special location. And we do have two great resets, and that kind of makes perfect sense. A lot of the ancient scriptures in China about how people use traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture to heal different diseases, those were knowledge from the ancient past that people now are trying to understand, like how they were able to use a few pressure points or needles to cure certain
Right.
diseases.
No, right. And it's fascinating how acupuncturists, the really good ones, and there's degrees of acupuncturists, and I know this because of what I do for a living. Some of them are really good and understand the nervous system
Yeah.
far better than they should, that sort of thing. I mean, it's really fascinating to look into that. But like you talk about the pyramids, the interesting thing about the pyramids is there's no pharaohs buried there.
Yeah.
Are they, if they're tombs, why are there no pharaohs buried there? Right? Stuff to make you, things that make you go, hmm. Speaking of the moon, there's a civilization, at least on the dark side of the moon. I know you've talked about it, and when you said it in some of the other interviews, I wanted to stand up and applaud, because it's like, I've been saying this for years, that the reason we haven't gone back to the moon has nothing to do with finances or the fact that we don't know how to do it anymore, because we know how to do it. But yeah, did something up there say, hey, stay away? You guys aren't ready to be here. Stay away till you're ready. And now I got to ask you, now you've got some other countries. China's one of them. Japan's talking about it. Elon Musk, who launches a Starlink every other day, he's got to be eyeing the moon as well. How does that all play out? I mean, we're still nowhere close to being spiritually ready to engage with whatever's over there. So how do you think that all plays out? And can you elaborate on what is on the dark side of the moon?
Well, I think they're sooner or later going to find more excuses of not landing another astronaut on the moon. They can send probes, but not astronauts. I think the ETs are going to prevent us from visiting the moon again unless we are ready. I think, actually, I know someone in Orange County here in California who is able to see the organs of a person in front of her. And she has this kind of psychic abilities. And I asked her to look at the moon, the far side of the moon, and to see if she could see anything. And she said that she was warned off. And the people on the moon were kind of upset of her looking at them. So this is like anecdotal evidence that I can talk about.
Yeah.
And I think it's now going to be very good if we send people again on the moon.
Yeah, I imagine people have tried to remote view over there, and I know that there is, and I've never even shared this story anywhere to anybody other than my family members. Like my father used to be able to do this stuff, and he could, like the book even talks about certain people are able to separate their astral bodies from their physical through meditation or through skill. My father was one of these guys who could do that, and he used to be able to just get out of his body. This is what he told me. And my mother, who was very skeptical about it, said, "No, I believe this." And they did. He would at George Washington University. They did studies and stuff, and they would put. And I've heard about these studies where they put like cards up in a box on the ceiling and say what's in there, and he would be able to get out and tell what was going on. But he had the same sort of thing, like flying around the universe and being warned by certain creatures or beings or something. You're not supposed to be here. Leave. That sort of thing. So it sounds like that's what they experience. But it does tie into this other thing I wanted to talk to you about, the Thiaoubans and telepathic communication. That being like, Michel gets all these messages from Thao that are they're never spoken. They're just telepathically in his head. And there's a lot of speculation about ETs and beings like that and how they communicate telepathically. Do you think this ties into like the grander concept of consciousness and God and things like that?
And I think it's actually an innate ability that we all can develop through practice, through meditation, or other psychic practices. There are people in Brazil, the Native Brazilian tribes, who, at least in the 1960s, who were able to do that. And also telepathic tapes is another evidence. So I think this is like an ability in which we were able to develop when in the ancient past, in ancient civilizations, where people in Africa lived in pastoral parts of the continent, not in major cities, because once you live in major cities, you if you focus on materialism, you kind of lose the ability to practice your psychic abilities. And I think that's probably the reason why a lot of people are not discovering their potentials to the fullest extent.
Yeah, like you mentioned the telepathy tapes and the nonverbal autistic children. And I'm just wondering, like, do you think like some of these kids or some people who, they lose some of their senses and it gets overcompensated by some of the other ones and it kind of ties into telepathy and it enables them to unlock abilities that a lot of us have suppressed either through, external influences. I won't say forces, but just like media, TV and that sort of thing. But some other people who don't have that sort of interference are able to tap into this psi ability that maybe we've forgotten over periods of time.
Exactly. So when you meditate, when you get your brain waves into the theta stage, you can actually achieve a lot of the magic wonders and that the Bible talks about or describes. And actually, when you tune in to the vibrational frequencies of the other person, you may be able to communicate with that person telepathically. So this is my speculation. It's not proven, but I just speculate that people can still do that. And actually, the other book, 334,000 Lies, talks about the psychic abilities of the secret society members have. Actually, that book is a very interesting book too. And you can read about that and learn about how they develop such abilities.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. And I mean, the work that Kai Dickens is doing on the telepathy tapes are getting awfully close to starting to provide empirical data that you can point to and say, see, there it is. They're proving it. They're going about it in a way that is scientifically driven. And, by the time they get to season 3, who knows what they're going to come up with. The other thing I want to ask you about the Thiaoubans is they have mastered the art. It's not levitation, but they've got apparatus and things like on their belt buckles and things that allow them to fly around. I'm reading this, I'm like, God, this sounds like Superman. It's sort of that sort of ability that they're just able to fly around at vast speeds and things. And yeah, I'm a big nerd and a big geek, Sam. I got to be honest with you. So Superman's my favorite character of all time. So I'm reading this thinking, wow, how cool would that be? And so they talk about, it's arguably too, when people are always asked, what superpowers would you want to have? Flight is always a big one. And mind reading is always a big one. And Thiaoubans have both of those. I kind of wanted to see what did you think about that?
Yeah, I think this is so the key is that they use a very simple apparatus to do this. Very simple, like that nothing is so very complicated on the planet. So including their dwellings or their structure where they live in. So the thing that they use a very small, like a handle and something on their belt to do this is amazing. They can neutralize gravity, local gravity, so they become weightless without weight. And then they would form like a force field in which when you move around, you don't feel anything. It's just like sitting in a car. You're moving with the air in the car. So they don't feel anything when they move at high speed, 200 or 300 miles per hour. And I think, and also they just, people have to read the book to dig into it further.
You do, and I implore people to read the book because it does go into like the concept of levitation. They can do it. A lot of them can levitate without even that apparatus, but it's more of a local, isolated sort of. You're not going to fly around the planet using levitation. There's nobody who has the. I mean, like if we're going to use the Superman example, he doesn't need anything. He just flies around and defies the laws of gravity because he's Superman. They don't have that, but there is that ability that some of them have to levitate. So it's very interesting. The dividing point, they say, yeah, we can do it, but it's not practical. So we use this instead. So
Yes.
I found that very interesting.
And people can look up the video by Dan White, a magician who visited Nepal, witnessing a Nepali monk levitating in front of him, in front of the candles while chanting. And the magician Dan White didn't know how he did it. And I think that's evidence that such abilities still exist.
Yeah, I think, like you said, they're latent abilities. They're there within us. We've just been cut off from them because, maybe it is because of the resets or something that happened in the world, or just kind of it is external stimuli, I think, has suppressed a lot of our natural abilities that we've just forgotten. And, we need an awakening, whether that comes from extraterrestrials or interdimensionals or whatever the case may be. It's just something that we need to be reminded of. We talked about it earlier, the concept of reincarnation, birth, death, rebirth. And I think like Michel had been on his first life, or if I remember in the book that they talked about, he was on his first
Yes.
go round. So the book deviates quite a bit from the notion of heaven, hell, so forth. It focuses on reincarnation, and reincarnation from the standpoint of spiritually progressing from one level of spiritual evolution to the next. So you're starting at one and you're trying to get to that ninth level where presumably you go back to source. You kind of threw me for a loop earlier, right? Saying that Michel went from level 7 back to level 1, and why are the reasons? But maybe like, and we're going to get into the whole story about Jesus in just a minute, but maybe there's reasons why these more evolved astral beings need to come back and help certain other beings to progress on that. So, what are your thoughts on this concept? Because there are some people who, the story of God and creation and that sort of thing, and it's all kind of tied together because I don't know. I wanted to get your thoughts on that because I'm not very, like Dale was a pastor, and I give him nothing but ultimate credit for that. But even as a pastor, he was very cognizant of the dangers of organized religion. I'm nowhere near where he is, but I've got my own belief that yeah, I believe in whatever, like the book calls it the Great Spirit. And the Great Spirit started the Big Bang, and that started everything. Now, you can call it the Great Spirit or you can call it God. I think we're talking about the same thing. But, what message the people who are devoutly religious are the people who are probably going to have the most difficulty with concepts in the book. And what message do you give to them to try and get around just shutting that thing down? Oh, no, this doesn't align with what I've been taught. I'm not even going to pay any attention to it. How do you get through to people like that?
400 years ago, the church people believed that we were the center of the universe. And then it's only in the 1990s that the Vatican admitted that they were wrong. And then nowadays we have to believe in science. I would suggest people read the works of Dr. Ian Stevenson. He published peer-reviewed papers that indicates the possibility of reincarnation, and also read doctors such as Brian Weiss, Michael Newton, and Raymond Moody, the medical doctors who study past lives through hypnosis or past life regressions. So I think we have to really be kind of alert on the scientific evidence that present us. And also the concept of reincarnation is not a new concept for a lot of people in Asia, like people in China or India. And the Bible doesn't talk about it, but in a sense, I'll explain the process of what goes on after death and to see if it makes sense or common sense, or if it works with your gut feelings. Is that when we pass, we are going to go through a life reveal process in which everything will be shown to you. everything you did and other people did to you and you did to others and how others felt. It's like a holographic experience in which you're able to feel not only your own feelings, but the feelings of others. And then you're going to evaluate how you did in your lifetime. But because you are the creations of the Creator, so when the Creator created everything, including human beings and the ETs, it inserted a tiny portion of itself to each of our astral bodies. So you are part of the Creator and the Creator is part of you. So you are evaluating yourself how you did in the past, in the past life. Yes, in essence, it's the Creator or God evaluating or having a judgment on you. And then you're going to understand everything, what you did correctly or indirectly or incorrectly. And then you're going to decide what kind of spiritual lessons to learn. And then you're going to decide which families to be born into or on which planet, reject it or approve it. So this is a process. Then as you grow spiritually enough, you're going to elevate yourself and be born onto a higher category of planet, such as Thiaoouba. And then that planet is going to be like a paradise or a heaven-like planet. You're going to feel everything is going to be perfect. That's probably the ultimate goal, the end game of the journey of life. But in between, when you pass, when you die, you're going to have a very blissful experience in which the people who have near-death experiences always talk about. They don't want to come back to life because they feel very comfortable, just like in heaven. They meet all the religious leaders in the religions that they believe in, and then they would unless they care for the people on earth, they wouldn't want to come. And so this is actually the process in which a lot of evidence present to us, and I think we need to look carefully. And for the Christians, they can read the works of Roberta Grimes, who is a devout Christian, but she believes in reincarnation and past lives. So I think people need to be open-minded and respect evidence and science.
You talked about Ian Stevenson. Have you read the book? I'll recommend a book for you, Surviving Death by Leslie Kean. And Netflix adapted some of the book into a series, which is good, but it doesn't go into nearly the depth that the book does. But in Thiaoouba Prophecy, Thao talks to Michel about, and I don't remember this the exact word for it, but the river of oblivion, right? So when you die, you go through the river of oblivion, which takes away 99% of your memories, right? And there's always that little shred that's left over that's deja vu. But there in Surviving Death, and I think Andy even mentioned this, he talked about it on his show, that there are documented cases, these kids, and it's only with the kids, right? The kids come back and they have these distinct memories of past lives. Like one of the kids in Surviving Death remember dying in World War II in a plane crash, was adamant and knew all this stuff and talked to his family about it. And they were able to document all this stuff. And I mean, it's very powerful evidence that, or at least a strong suggestion in the concept of reincarnation. And, you know, as the kids get older, they tend to forget these things. And, you know, when you're young, you're more in touch with, you know, past, I don't know about past lives, but just less or less impressionable by the will of the world, that sort of thing. But yeah, that reading that really resonated with me as far as like, that makes a lot of sense as to why you don't remember anything from your past life. But then there get these little glimpses. I've been here before. I've seen this before. This feels familiar. I mean, and I'm sure you've experienced the same thing in your own life.
Yes. In fact, that actually explains what birthmarks are. If you really think about it, if you had a trauma or was injured in your past life, that injury or that trauma actually affected your astral body. And when your astral body enters into the embryo of the womb of the mother, then it actually keeps the injuries or the effects of the injury on the astral body. So when you are born, you're going to have those appear as birthmarks. This is actually proven by Ian Stevenson. And people should read his work. His works are great.
Yeah, and he's mentioned prominently in Surviving Death as well. I'd highly recommend, if you're really interested, Samuel, check that book out. It's a very good read, and there's a lot of good information in there. I did want to get into the part of the book that really, I think, and I know this is the part of the book that really convinced you that this was not a story of fiction, the story, this chapter about Christ, and how there's a Jesus, and he was not necessarily Jesus Christ, that it's not the same entity. So I wanted to kind of get your take on that and have you explain that because you're going to explain it a lot better than I will. I'll just mess it up at some point. But can you explain for the people listening in, there's a difference between Jesus and there's a difference between Christ, and why is that difference so significant?
Yeah, so Jesus was indeed born out of Virgin Mary because he was actually born from the embryo put by the ETs to the uterus of Virgin Mary so that people could pay attention to that miraculous event. And everything written in the Bible is actually basically true, like what Joseph saw and actually the Star of Bethlehem and also the some of the other things mentioned in the Bible, that King Herod killing all the babies. So that event, miraculous event, caught people's attention. So that actually achieved the purpose of the ETs, trying to help people to become more aware of the spiritual side of the life. Because the Romans, during that period of time, caused a lot of confusions with their rules and also with their religions like gods and goddesses. So they actually restrained the spiritual development of the people at that time, or suppressed the correct development, the spiritual development. So that young Jesus actually, because when the embryo was born, when the young Jesus was born that way, he didn't have the memories of the knowledge to perform miracles. Because, as you mentioned, the river of oblivion erased his memories of past lives and also the ability to perform miracles. But people in the past, as well as people nowadays, they were highly skeptical. Unless someone who could perform miracles, his teachings wouldn't have been believed by the people at that time. So this is why the ETs had to send someone who could perform miracles. So what happened was that Jesus, who was born out of Virgin Mary, he traveled to India and then through China and died in Japan. So this is why there's a tomb of Jesus in Shingo Village, Japan, that people can still visit. But Christ was actually an entity or person who was actually an ET. What they did is that they actually built or made a body, a physical body that resembled the appearance of Jesus who went through India and died in Japan. And then they had their own ET to come into the physical body made by them to appear to be like Jesus, as born out of Virgin Mary. So this is probably the reason why after Christ began preaching, when he saw his mother, he didn't call his mother mother, he calls his mother woman. And this is why all of a sudden Christ was able to perform all the miracles after he began preaching. And this is the reason why Christ had to die on the cross and then resurrect 3 days after, just to show people at that time that there's life after death and there's reincarnation. He was preaching about love and spirituality, but also wanted to show people through his personal resurrection that there's beyond death, life after death. But for some reason, the concept of reincarnation was later removed by the Catholic Church Council meetings, and the book named the 4 Catholic Church Council meetings that intentionally distorted the original meanings of the ancient scriptures of the Bible.
And I think this is the part, as we know, the part of the story where the people who are devoutly, Christian, Catholic, all that, all the subgenres of Christianity, that I'll just call it. Sorry, please don't be too mad at me. But, they took an evolved astral body and they implanted it in the embryo. So the Jesus that is actually born to Mary, and I know that the Thiaoubans made the Star of Bethlehem and all that sort of thing, but the embryo that was implanted in the Virgin Mary was still a highly evolved person.
Yes.
He would grow up to be a highly evolved person, but not capable of producing the miracles that Christ produced later on. And you get that whole idea of, and I know Dale talked about it, the gap in Jesus's history that's in the Bible where, part of people think, oh, he's wandering around the desert for all these years and that sort of thing. But you're saying, no, he went to Asia, he went to India. He I think in the book, they say he got married, had 3 children, died, he's got a tomb in Japan. I guess one of the things is like the 3 kids that he has anybody tried to pin down that bloodline? Because I hear that. And I think Da Vinci Code, right? Dan Brown's book, Da Vinci Code, where you've got this line of Jesus's descendants, and the gal at the end is one of them. Do you know, has anybody done any research into that to try and pin down Jesus's bloodline?
I have not tried to do that because personally, I think because he was born this way, even though he came from our category like 9 planet, but he was born this way, he lost all the memories to perform miracles. And that's not as significant as studying the people who came from Category 3 planet and didn't go through this process of losing the memories by going through the river of Oblivion. So I think rather than studying the lineage of the 3 daughters of Jesus in Japan, I think it's probably better to look up to or to study the Jewish people, I think.
Yeah. I mean, studying the Jew, and honestly, for all you know, the Jewish people might be part of that bloodline. I mean, that you don't know. I mean, that could explain a lot of things. But getting back to the notion of Christ and how it was a Theoban in kind of, I guess, kind of a manufactured human-esque body that was it was a Theoban kind of they made their own thing, but that Theoban, we know that they've got extreme abilities of telepathy, regeneration. They can resurrect themselves. They can be resurrected, that sort of thing. Um, and I get and that all makes sense. But I guess what about that story resonated with you so strongly and convinced you that, okay, this book is not a work of fiction. This is more factual.
Because I looked it up. I searched online to find the tomb of Jesus in Japan. And indeed, the descriptions on the website that I found back in 2014 matched the descriptions in the book exactly, including the tomb next to the tomb of Jesus, in which, according to the book, is a tomb of his brothers who died in China and buried a lock of his hair in that tomb. So that actually matched a lot of the things I was wondering about, because the book also resonates to me regarding the hypocrisy of the people in the church, like the Crusades, the Spanish Inquisition, in the name of God, killing so many people. And I think this book actually talks about the reasons. Yeah,
no, you're right.
Yeah.
There's an aspect of the book that they talk about specifically to the Jewish people that hit me, because Thao tells Michel that the Hebrews had been waiting for the Messiah for all these years, and they missed the fact that he already came. And that has always been one of the big, from a Jewish standpoint, the Judaism standpoint, they are still waiting for the Messiah to come. And did we miss it? Did we just ignore the fact that the Theobans had came and said, well, here's your Messiah? And I get where the Jewish people come from, because in our faith, or in a lot of, we don't have all the subgenres of religion like the Christian faith does. There's some variation, yes, but not a lot. But in our viewpoint, it's like, well, when the Messiah comes, there's supposed to be everlasting peace. And since Christ came, like you're saying, a lot of people took his name and decided, let's fight all these wars in his name. Let's do these crusades in his name. And it makes me wonder, the Theobans obviously had a really good idea as to what they wanted to do when they did the whole thing of Christ. And as advanced as they are, I guess even they could make a mistake. Do you think they miscalculated how primitive we were, and that we would just bastardize this whole situation and make it something that they never intended?
This is a very good question. I think a lot of the Christians in the world are still very good people and following the 10 Commandments. And I think nowadays, you look at what happened to Christianity versus Judaism, sometimes I think it's probably better to follow the 10 Commandments and not to worship idols and to live good lives, respecting each other. And this is actually a better life than a lot of the Christians have been doing in history, killing all the people. So I think we really have to be a little bit careful when talking about which result would have been better. And I think a lot of Christians, due to the power structure, it's always a clergy. If you look at the history, it's always a clergy people that resulted in a lot of the misfortunes for the people in the world. But the people at the bottom, they pray and they are simple-minded people, and they follow the scriptures and do good things to others. And sometimes they're misled. So I really don't have an answer. I think it's probably better to have the right knowledge and to really kind of eliminate religion as a matter of fact. And I think be spiritual and follow the teachings of Moses and Christ. And I think that's probably the best thing for anyone to do on earth.
I agree. Once you remove the organized religion aspect out of this, a lot of things tend to fall into place. And it makes a lot more sense that way. Samuel, I want to move away from the book because we could spend the next 2 hours talking about this. I want to talk to you a little bit more about just some general concepts about China a little bit. You were there until 1993, correct? That's what you said earlier.
Yes.
And I know on other interviews that you've done, the impression I got is that in the past, and I know it got a little different, but in the past, it seems like China has been kind of ambivalent about UAPs. Like they weren't suppressing any information, but they weren't exactly promoting it either. Am I on the right path there? And do you still feel like that's the case in China, or has their posture on this issue shifted?
Well, the posture on this issue has shifted, especially in the last 10 years or so. In the past, they did not promote nor they did not suppress either, but nowadays they suppress such information because they want the stability of the country to be their ultimate goal and ultimate policy direction. So this is why they think the ETs are going to cause kind of instability of the people. But in the past, they were fairly open to the Qigong practices, paranormal events as reported, and also the ETs. Actually, the state media reported on a few ET abduction events or encounters that happened in China. But nowadays, they're not able to do that anymore.
And that's because of the shift in censorship. Like, has that had, in your opinion, a chilling effect on any sort of like grassroots disclosure movement or momentum amongst the populace of China as far as like trying to get to the bottom of this or get the truth out? Do you think like the increase in censorship is kind of tamping that down, or how's that working?
I think so. And also, frankly speaking, in China, people are becoming more materialistic. I mean, they don't know what to look for. But at the same time, this book fills a vacuum, the needs of the people to seek for spiritual solutions. And actually, as a science fiction, it's actually one of the best-selling books in China nowadays. And people rely on books like this to really fulfill their needs, spiritual needs. And I think that's kind of like a good thing that the government did, and versus some of the things, I think, with today's information, what's happening in the U.S., people focusing on the witnesses in Congress, I think that's a misdirection, actually. I think people have been too focused on the technologies retrieved from the reverse engineer activities of the scientists in the U.S., versus they should focus more on the real questions, the spiritual implications, religious or theological implications of the disclosure. I think in this sense, Chinese people or the public, not the government, the public is far more advanced than the Americans or American counterparts in focusing the direction on what the advanced ETs have been telling us.
That's a good point. Like, it sounds like the Chinese people are a little bit more in touch with the more consciousness-based spiritual thing. I mean, here in the United States, and I'm sure you've been exposed to it. I know you do stuff with MUFON and things like that. So you hear the same things I do. Where's the proof? Where's the evidence? Where's the nuts and bolts? I need the craft. I need this element 115 in my living room. Where is all this stuff? And it sounds like in China, they're much more willing to look beyond that and look at the more spiritual, consciousness-based elements of things. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, there's a divergence in China. The people who are becoming more materialistic are like that, but people at the same time are also looking towards the deeper questions, like the meaning of life, how they should respond to the increasingly challenged environment that they're living in China. So people are seeking for answers from this book and others.
Yeah, and I know, like you mentioned, science fiction being big in China. Three Body Problem, of course, one of the biggest books that came out in China in recent years. And I know somebody like on Andy's show had asked you the question about whistleblowers in China, and when he asked it, I was like, "There's no whistleblowers in China. That's not realistic." But the concept of like what was in Three Body Problem. A program that's looking into, something that's kind of like SETI based, the SETI sort of thing in the United States, like they were doing radio signals out into space. And of course, the whole thing turns when somebody answers, "Yeah, we can't save ourselves, come get us," sort of thing. Do you know of anything like that going on in China? Any sort of programs like that? I mean, I know they're going to suppress that leaking out and all, but do you know of anything like that in China? These programs where obviously you're not going to get whistleblowers, but have you heard any rumors or anything like that of programs like that existing in China?
No, I mean, if you know the Chinese government, they're really bureaucratic, and the military is somewhat corrupt, and the president of China is trying to clean it up. I wouldn't suggest any kind of development or research into this field, and I don't think, given what I know about China, that they're near as interested as the U.S. government in this area. And I would turn people's attention to Israel, because I think if the ETs really want to make contact, they are definitely going to involve the Jewish people.
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to like what you're saying is if the Hebrews and the Israelites are all these level 3 individuals, and you know, and I don't want to get into the politics of it, and I'm not going to sit there and say, yeah, everything Israel has done in Gaza is the right thing. I mean, I think they've got their reasons, and I know what the reasons are. The humanitarian crisis is a real thing, and I think you can't ignore what's going on over there. But sure, if the Hebrews and the Israelites are remnants of a level 3 planet, people there, I mean, that'd be a good place for them to go and say, hey, these guys can actually, they can relate to us on a level that that some of the other planet. And again, I'm not trying to make a religious statement about the Jewish people or anything like that. What about Asia in general? And I don't know if this question has been asked of you yet. Like, I mean, you know, Jesus's tomb you're talking was in Japan. We've got, Asia's got a lot of people. I mean, an enormous amount of people. Do you know how Asia in general, like Japan, Taiwan, Michelle settled in Vietnam? So you you know, obviously you spent some time in Vietnam. How is the subject of UAPs approached in these other Asian countries, if you know?
Well, I can talk about the book. In Japan, it was a bestseller before it was published in China. In Korea, it was not selling very well because South Korea is a very Christian country. So you know why. In Vietnam, it has a difficult time getting it published because of the content of the book. Vietnam has a censorship over there. And I think people just have been, because those are developing countries like Vietnam, Thailand, and also the Philippines, Indonesia. So they have been really focusing more on the economic development, like China in the last 20 or 30 years or so. So I think people have not really been paying a lot of attention to this field. However, I really want people to realize that one of the biggest whistleblower in the last few years was actually the Israeli space agency's head, the head of space. Forgot his name. But if he was, yeah, he said there was a galactic alliance or something, and the President Trump knew about it. And I think people, and also he was kind of, people should focus more on people like them to really know what is going on. And also this book, because if this book connects everything, the paranormal and also religion and ancient civilizations, politics, if we haven't talked about politics, the political structure that they're suggesting us to have. And I think this book is probably should be looked into and should be read by more people at the grassroots level, so that we can actually form a kind of a collective consciousness that remains more long-lasting than the top-down approach if you want to change the government. So I think this is something that I would suggest people to look into.
Yeah, I want to come back to the Galactic Federation or the Illuminati or whatever we want to call that in just a moment. But while we're on the topic of China, I mean, despite the political differences between the countries over there and the makeup of things, it seems like, you know, a lot of the Asian countries look to China as a leader of sorts. And that kind of brings me to ask, you know, like, and it has been asked of you on other shows, like, what are the most important, in your opinion, UAP-related sightings or events in China's history?
Well, there were a lot of sightings in China's history, especially the modern history of China. With the advent of cell phones, and people have been taking photos or videos of their sightings. I think the sightings are good, but not really the focus of me, because we have been facing more challenges as human species on Earth, like the wars and conflicts and caused by certain groups of people. There have been like a few encounters with the ETs in China, in which I mentioned in Andy's show, the one that really showed the ET contactee about the depletion of natural resources in the world using a holographic presentation, showing him, here is your natural gas resource, here's your petroleum or oil resources. If you don't take care of the environment, you're going to use up everything. And then the other encounter in which the school principal was taken by the ETs onto their spacecraft, in which he was taught to heal a girl by putting his hand on her lower neck. And then they later identified the girl who was actually disabled before and then got better after that incident. They all passed the polygraph exam and also psychological exams. So those are the credible encounters of the Chinese people with the ETs. There are also other kind of dubious encounters in which people claim, in which I'm not going to talk about here because those are just could be their imaginations or hallucinations. But those two are actually well documented and researched by ufologists and scientists in China and reported widely on the official media of China.
And I know like somebody had asked you about incidents where the airport in Beijing was shut down, and you hear everything going on in Europe now with drones are shutting down airports. But a couple of incidents that I found that I hadn't heard mentioned before that I wanted to ask you about if you'd heard them. This Dropa Stones incident, where they've got beings with oversized skulls, thin bodies. They sound a lot like the tridactyls, the mummies over in Peru. When I heard the description, I was like, gosh, this sounds kind of like them. And I'm wondering, have you heard of this incident? And do you think could this be remnants of one of these lost prior civilizations?
It could well be because the lost civilizations had or were able to produce this kind of Dropa stones. And I think we should research more. But I think right now the more urgent issue is the state of world that we are in. And actually, the book talks about when people try to research about Atlantis, Lemuria, and I kind of sway people around by saying that you should put your time on other things that are more important. But I do agree that Dropa stones could be the remnants of the ancient civilizations.
Moria, you've mentioned that a couple times. One of the big urban legends in California, of course, is that a colony of Lemurians ended up at Mount Shasta, and that Mount Shasta itself is this mythical sort of mountain. What do you think about that? I mean, that's one of the more popular rumors. There's even a hiker, like you talked earlier about hikers and people who disappear in the national parks, and I forget the guy's name, but like one guy just vanished into thin air, never to be seen again on one of these expeditions looking for Lemuria in Shasta. What do you think about that story? That's an interesting one. That's kind of close-ish to home.
Yeah, I think the Mount Shasta is one of the locations in which the warps frequently travel to, or maybe frequently float into. And I think it could be one of the portals in which people get sucked into. But we are lawyers, so we have to respect evidence. We have to be able to really dig into some of the things that are credible. And people have legends about the people live below ground. And I think if we study geology, we know that the core of Earth is really hot. There may be underground civilizations, but I think we need to have specific verifiable evidence in order to conclude.
You're absolutely right. I mean, the whole notion of hollow earth, I mean, theoretically, since we're talking about some wild, like you're saying, we're lawyers, so you have to look at the evidence. Could there be a space-time bubble in the earth that creates some sort of alternate dimension? Okay, possibly, but there's no evidence of anything like that. I mean, that's pretty fantastical. But like going toward like more evidence-based stuff, there are incidents. I read about one 1998. Chinese pilots pursued an object over, I think, Queen County. I'm not sure what it is, but the object pretty much evaded them rather easily. And when I read that, I'm like, wow, that's similar to incidents like they had the one in Iran in 1976, where a pilot opened fire or tried to open fire on an object and everything jammed up. Similar incident in Peru in 1980. You talked about the hearings. We just saw the video, which I don't want to get into the credibility of whatever we saw with the Hellfire missile and did it hit a UAP? Was it a soft target? That sort of thing. But, I did want to ask you, what do you think of these sort of events where the military any military is actively engaging with UAPs? They're usually unsuccessful. And everything that we've learned in the book and all that stuff, it doesn't seem like the best course of action for any military on the planet to be just openly combative towards these entities, whoever or whatever they are.
Yeah, exactly. And I think those UAPs, are actually from the less advanced ETs, not from Thiaoouba, because the Thiaoubans would not want to, or will not, I would say, send some of the things visible to us and have our military uh, act on that. But their technologies are so far more advanced. First of all, they wouldn't hurt us at all, and they would guide us. Secondly, if we try to do something like that, then it's going to be in vain. So I think the military actions of China and other countries are probably not the best course of action. And I think also I mentioned on a few interviews is that the Chinese military did not have an answer to those either. They concluded in the early 1990s that there were not activities of foreign espionage, and those UAPs were not causing any issues to the security of China. So they just didn't know what to do. So they sought help from ufologists of China and asking him, semi-private setting to see what to do with them. And they didn't know what to do, and they still don't know what to do.
So it sounds like the Chinese made the determination that these weren't American, these weren't Russian, these weren't adversarial. They were something else. We don't know what they are. They sought the help of ufologists, and they're like, I don't know what they are either. And they're and that's kind of where they left it, right?
Yes, and
Huh.
I think
That-
the Chinese government is probably too busy for other matters and not paying attention to this, even though they launched kind of like probes to the moon. And when I look at it, when they took pictures on the far side of the moon, they did not really send a picture or make it public immediately. So there's a delay of time. So I don't know what happened in between.
Oh, that's interesting. And it does tie into what I wanted to ask you, this concept of catastrophic disclosure. We've talked about, well, I haven't really talked about, but you talked about the hearings and how disclosure efforts here in the States, and you've been in the States for all these years, so you're closer to the grassroots and the efforts here in the United States than you probably are to China. We've seen what's happened with disclosure efforts here in the States. And one of the big concerns is that catastrophic disclosure will take place where some whistleblower just dumps everything on the world. And James Iandoli, who I'd interviewed on here from Engaging the Phenomenon a few weeks ago, he had a different sort of take on catastrophic disclosure, that what if a nation other than the United States, i.e. Russia, China, Israel, somebody like that, what if they came to the forefront and said, we're going to disclose this information and kind of like be the pace setters in this whole thing? Do you see any sort of scenario where China would be the country to make this disclosure to the world? And why or why not?
Given what I know about the current government of China, they don't have the courage, or they don't have the information, or the I would say that they just wouldn't. They wouldn't join, or they may be join as a participant just to show off to the Chinese people, but they wouldn't take the lead at all. I would say the lead might be taken by the American and Israeli government. Maybe it's European government. The Russians, it could happen, but actually Russia is actually more open than the U.S. government in this field, but a lot of information is written in Russian. I think the of Russia, or the Prime Minister of Russia, said that they know a dozen ETs or so, or they have profiled them, something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting that, I mean, the Russians, obviously, like you're saying, the Chinese government, they've got their hands full with other issues that are more pressing. And that probably is doubly true for Russia, who's fighting a war that has gone horribly badly for them and that sort of thing. But I did want to kind of tie back into, and I promised we would go back to this idea of a Galactic Federation or an Illuminati, which you've kind of mentioned in other interviews, that if there's an agreement amongst the nations of the earth and possibly with the ETs, who would not be the Thiaoubans, I think if there is an agreement in place, it's not with the Thiaoubans, it's with one of these lesser planets, right? Do you think, is that what really is going to prevent any of these nations from coming forward and saying, hey, here's what's really going on?
Well, I think we have to separate the Galactic Federation or Alliance from the Illuminati, because those are two separate concepts. The secret societies manipulate everything behind the scenes, causing conflicts and divisions in the world, making scapegoats out of certain groups of people on Earth. Then they're actually, they have psychic abilities. Read the other book that I translated, 334 per thousand lies. So they do that. They manipulate the politicians. But the Galactic Federation, I think if that exists, then it's going to be a coalition of the lesser advanced ETs who try to negotiate with US governments or the coalition of international governments who are participants. But I think the ultimate time will come when the ones mentioned in the Bible will just to guide us again. And I think that's probably going to be very significant, given what I know about how they did in certain things in the past. So I wouldn't put too much attention to the Galactic Federation or the Alliance or the Three-Eye Atlas for that matter, because I think it's important to really be ready. Be ready spiritually so that we can explore the moon, so that we can open the three chambers beneath the Sphinx, so that we can live peacefully amongst ourselves and be ready to explore outside of the solar system. I think that's actually more urgent than the other things that people have been paying attention to.
But it does make a lot of sense because one of the big pushbacks you'll get about this whole Galactic Federation is why would they want to enter any sort of agreement with us? And when you read the book, it makes more sense. Yes, the Thiaoubans have they're not going to sit down for a parlay with us and sit there and say, yeah, if you give us your people, we will give you technology. They're not going to do that. But a level 2, 3, 4 planetary system, they just might, because they're not so advanced that they couldn't benefit from natural resources, from some of our technology, which they may not have all of that sort of things. I mean, does that make sense what I'm saying, that if there's a Galactic Federation amongst the lesser planets in the United States, that's more palatable than thinking that a level 9 or 8 or 7 is sitting down with the president saying, hey, let's talk.
Yeah, in a sense, that's more reasonable and plausible. But on the other hand, in the book, actually, if you read into it and between the lines, you're going to realize that even for Archie, the one from a Category 1 planet, when he or their people visited us, they actually didn't really want to have anything to do with us. And Michel was actually pretty upset about that. He had his French proud. And this is actually the attitude, I think, among the other ETs who come to visit us, because we are considered savages back then. So I think people on Earth need to realize this.
Strong argument, we're still savages now. That sort of thing. So, I'm going to get ready to close this up because I don't want to keep you here all night. But the disclosure effort in the United States, and this is more from an attorney to an attorney sort of question, that sort of thing. I know you're very familiar with Danny Sheehan and Danny's efforts to try and really push disclosure forward. And with whistleblowers and protections for them, Danny Kane, I think it was on Andy's show as well, he kind of said this is going to have to be constitutionally challenged at some point in time, because the Supreme Court is going to uphold the Defense Department's ability to just strangle any sort of disclosure unless everybody and their mother has the proper clearance. Do you agree with Danny on this point? Is this something that has to be challenged constitutionally? Because you got to get some of that power away from the executive branch. Yes, the Democrats did well in these last elections, but not so well that to strip away power from the executive branch, you got to have some real force on the legislative or the judiciary branch. I don't see the Supreme Court stepping in and doing anything like that. Do you agree with that concept, or what do you think of that?
I think it's definitely a concept that we must give it a try. I don't think that's going to happen under Trump's administration, given the mentalities and the stronghold of Trump. And also, I think we have to take a two-pronged approach. I agree with his idea. I think it's very challenging. It's very difficult to do. But I think he is also taking the grassroots approach as well. And that's actually going to be more important to get people to act. And I hope that he succeeds. And I'm actually going to work with him on some of the things here. And I think it takes a lot of efforts.
Yeah, I would jump in there as well, because the constitutional challenges those are the tough ones. Those are the ones that really you can get lost in the weeds. I've personally have argued statutory construction at the appeals court in my career, so I know a little bit about that. But it's going to be a tough fight with the Supreme Court and the makeup that you have right now for them to say, hey, and I think it was Joe Spielberger at the hearing, and I would urge people to read Joe's written statement because he provides the case law that really set forth why the Supreme Court upheld the Defense Department's ability to say we are the ultimate purveyors, and the people who are going to tell you, here's what you can say, here's what you can't say, here's who you can say it to. And the makeup of the Supreme Court is not such right now that they're going to say, yeah, let's overturn that. You're not going to get enough for a constitutional amendment to do away with that either,
Yeah. And also, I agree. I think it's going to be a challenge for him to succeed this way. I think the grassroots approach is probably better for now.
Yeah. And speaking of the grassroots approach, Age of Disclosure coming out in just a little less than 2 weeks now. It's been one of the most highly anticipated documentaries in recent memory dealing with this. Do you think that what you know about the movie, do you think it's going to have any sort of impact on this whole grassroots sort of campaign, in the concept that it's going to get more of the mainstream media asking questions, talking about it, that sort of thing? Do you think this is going to have any sort of impact on this whole grassroots movement?
I think it's going to get more people interested, but I also think that it's going to misdirect a lot of people's attention to the nuts and bolts approach that a lot of people have been focusing on. And I think we should focus more on the other aspects of the disclosure. But I think they laid a very good foundation in getting people interested in the subject matter. I think that's good. Once they lay the foundation, we can work towards the ultimate goal, which is to spiritually wake people up.
I agree with you. Are you going to go see the movie? Are you going to go see it in LA, or are you going to get it on Prime, or how are you going to go about it?
I'm probably going to see the movie and then to see how people react in a
Well,
theater.
I might have an extra ticket, Samuel. I'm going on opening night down in LA, so I might have an extra ticket. I'll have to send you a message if that all comes up. I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll help. I think my personal opinion is it'll help. I think it's going to make some of the gatekeepers a little uncomfortable for a few weeks, because, you hear, and sure you've heard the same thing. Oh, these are all, and I'm just going to speak frankly here, so forgive me. These are all lying, full of shit grifters on here talking about this stuff. And you hear the same thing, and it's like, every time I hear that, it's like you're talking about some of the most decorated people in the government. Either the United States government is the most horrible judge of character in the history of politics, or there's got to be some truth to this. What do you think about that? I mean, am I completely off base here, or how do you feel about that?
You're absolutely correct. Those messages from the film are going to get to the people who didn't believe anything on this matter, subject matter. They're probably going to cause them become interested. But people in our circle of friends are going to know that those are just used words. And I think it's important for people to realize that there are other sentient beings besides people on Earth, and they need to look into some of the other things that matter to them.
Yeah. No, because as an attorney, I'm like, I always go back to what's the motivation of all these people to lie? And that's where the disconnect is. It's like, well, maybe some of them, but all of these people from these high, Christopher Mellon and Tim Gallaudet, these decorated people, why would they be motivated? They're not making money off of this. I mean, maybe some, but not, what they would have got from their government pensions. So I always kind of side eye that when the big hardcore skeptics come out and say, oh, they're all lying. Why? What's their motivation to do that, right?
Especially like when Avi Loeb tried to encourage people to think outside the box in the academic circle, he encountered a lot of resistance and jealousies from his peers. So I think the mentalities of the people needs to be changed.
No, you're right. Avi's whole thing, and like so many people jumped on, oh, he's saying it's a spaceship. He never said that. He said it's probably a natural thing, but it's doing some weird things. And he's right. Sky Atlas has done some weird things. Is it going to pass by without incident? Highly likely. But at the same time, it's like, hey, think outside the box a little bit. So I agree with you. Let me close this up, Sam, with a little bit more fun topic. Just a few fun kind of questions for you. What are some of your favorite movies or series or documentaries or anything that just address the phenomenon of UFOs or UAPs in general?
I like Ancient Aliens show because I watched a few episodes and they actually get to the point I'm encourage people to think like outside of the box a little bit more. And I don't know about the others because I really don't watch them after reading this book. Seriously speaking, before I read this book, I was into the paranormal, ghosts, and the ET contactees, and also other things. But after reading this book, I felt that all the questions have been answered. So that's my feeling. So I don't watch those shows anymore.
It's interesting. Like, you look at shows like Ghost Adventures, it's like 21 seasons, and Ancient Aliens is like 21 seasons. And I went to see Ancient Aliens live when they were out here in Anaheim, which was a good show. But yeah, you look at shows like Ghost Adventures and Hauntings, and they kind of touch upon it in the book Ghosts and things like that. Hauntings, not so much, which, I've heard other people say that places and locations can actually like create a snapshot of a memory, like a reel, just playing over and over, that sort of thing. But yeah, I'm with you. I love all the paranormal shows, and some of the ghost shows are better than others. So I think we can agree on that sort of thing. But as far as like UFO and UAP related sightings or events, do you have a favorite one? One that really sticks out as like any sort of thing, any sort of favorite one like that?
It used to be Billy Meyer's pictures that got me interested in the field, but now I have some issues with the messages supposedly sent to him or through his people. So nowadays, I think Michel Desmarquet's encounter is actually the most important one because I consider this book to be the modern version of the Book of Enoch. So I think if this is unparalleled. I think this one is kind of very unique.
I agree with you there. So this question is tied into, because as you know, or you probably, I don't know if you know this or not, you probably do, but this show got started off, Attitude of Aggression is a pro wrestling podcast.
Yes.
So one of the big questions that the pro wrestling community loves to throw out there is who's on your Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling, or who's on your Mount Rushmore of the greatest matches of all time. So I like to ask this to my guests and see what they say. Who do you put on your Mount Rushmore of ufology?
I would say that's going to be, not yet, but that's going to be someone who takes the grassroots approach. Just like when Jesus or Christ came to us, he wasn't born of nobility, but he really was very humble and started to do a lot of things good for the people. It's going to be someone like Gandhi or Martin Luther King, who really influenced great amount of people at the grassroots level, making the change more long-lasting than what people are expecting. Because if you really expect the change to come from the top, from the president, then he may make the change, but it might not necessarily going to be long-lasting because he's going to encounter resistance from the special interest groups. So I think when people want the government to really disclose everything, I think they're probably going to be disappointed because the real change will happen by someone who leads the people.
Is there a personality who is kind of like well known, like a George Knapp, Richard Dolan, somebody like that, who has been really influential for you?
I think Avi Loeb is one person, Danny Shen definitely another. And I would say, yeah, I like Avi and also Danny too. And the third person, I don't know yet. I don't know yet.
It's fair. That's fair. It's throwing names at you and saying, "Hey, pick somebody." I want to close with this. My favorite quote in Thiaoouba Prophecy is near the very end, and it's one that when I read it, I underlined it on my Kindle and I printed it off. And it's simply, "Faith is never perfect, but knowledge is." I'm wondering what you think about that saying, and do you have a favorite quote of your own from the book, or quote or a message or anything like that?
Incidentally, that's also my favorite quote.
Is it?
Because,
Okay.
yes, because people have faith in everything, or they may have blind faith, but if they don't have the knowledge, then they're going to be blind. So I think knowledge is probably a better choice.
And it makes sense because faith is so subjective, right? It means different things to different people, but knowledge, that's as objective as you can get in a field that's based a lot on subjectivity and interpretation and things like that. Look, Samuel, I want to thank you so much for spending a couple hours of your time with me here on a Sunday night, a Sunday afternoon. It was great talking to you, and thank you so much for suggesting the book to me and giving me the time to read that before we talked. Before I let you go, can you let people know where can they follow you on social media, or if they want to connect with you in any way, if they've got questions of their own about the book, where can they reach out to you?
Yeah, they can find me on Facebook by searching my name, and also on X at Good Translator. They can find the book on Amazon and also on Audible as an audiobook because it's read by a very good British narrator. Check it out.
Awesome. Samuel, I want to thank you again so much for being a part of the show, coming on Unidentified History with me. I really hope we can get together in the near future, talk about more of this stuff, and see where things lead us. Maybe we'll be surprised. Maybe we'll have a spiritual awakening, and make some progress on this. But until next time, my friend, thank you so much. You take care of yourself, and we will be in touch, okay? All right, guys, that is going to do it for this edition of Unidentified History. Want to, of course, throw out a big thank you, shout out, and all that sort of great stuff to Samuel Chong for coming on the show and spending a couple hours of his Sunday evening with me to talk all about Thiaoouba Prophecy, and just a great conversation covering a whole range of topics. There's so much I wanted to talk to Sam about, a lot of other topics we never even got a chance to talk about. Talked about some stuff after the show off air, and that's going to stay between him and I, and that sort of thing. So it's a great conversation. I wish I could have spent a couple more hours with Sam, to be honest with you. But make sure you are checking him out. Go and get yourself a copy of the book, The Thiaoouba Prophecy. It will really change your perspective on so many aspects of the phenomenon and just what might be reality. And I deliberately set up the interview because I really wanted to kind of get an understanding of Michel Desmarquet right off the bat. To kind of take a look at who he was as a person. What was did he have the writing acumen to make what a lot of people consider is a work of fiction? But it's not. It's not a work of fiction. And I think it's important to keep in mind that all this stuff happened in '89. He wrote this in '89, well before the advent of the internet. you really got to look at that and say there's either he had a lot of people ghostwriting things for him and some talented authors ghostwriting it, or there's a lot of truth to that story. And you got to look at it and read that in the right context and say, wow, it's eye-opening. It really is. And a lot of it is going to make a lot of sense to a lot of people. And a lot of it is going to rub some people the wrong way. And like so many things, I think the really religious people may have some troubles with it. But I would urge anybody to read that and take a look at it. The next episode of Unidentified History is going to come your way after Age of Disclosure comes out, and that is coming out on November 21st. As I mentioned, I think on the episode of Game Gone Wrong that we just did the other day, I will be going to LA for the opening show. The 8:15 showing is the first one down at the Lumiere Theater in Los Angeles, Beverly Hills. So I will be there for that. I hope to do a review with the fellas probably the day after, maybe the Saturday after that. I know Tunny and DJ have both indicated they are buying it on Prime. I've actually already bought it on Prime, and I'm going to the live showing as well. And I'm hoping my wife can go down there with me. I'm not sure if that's going to work out, so she'll be able to watch it at home and hopefully not spoil it for me because, I kind of want to see what happens and see how it all turns out. So much about the documentary from both sides of the fence. There's a lot of people who can't wait, think that maybe this will move the needle. Maybe this will be a big breakthrough moment. There's a lot of people, of course, who think it's all everybody in Age of Disclosure is a counterintelligence agent. And like I said on this episode, a bunch of lying, full of shit grifters. You'll hear a lot of people say that. I'm not passing judgment on anybody. I'm reserving judgment to see how I feel about it on my own. And I will, of course, report to you guys, and we will all report to you as to our thoughts on the Age of Disclosure and whether it's going to make a difference. I mean, I kind of think, like I said on the episode tonight, it could make some of the gatekeepers a little uncomfortable for a while. But, the notion of any sort of deep state disclosure or this pushing anything in that direction, highly, highly, highly unlikely. But if it gets the mainstream media talking and it gets the public more interested in it, then that's a win. And that's, I think, the best you can hope for in this situation. So we will be coming back on the next episode of Unidentified History, probably around the 22nd, 23rd of November, to talk about Age of Disclosure. And we'll probably cover the Tunguska event because we talked about doing that next time. And then we're off to 1947, and that's going to be fun. And hopefully got some cool people coming on the show to help us navigate those waters because they're choppy and they're certainly eventful in 1947. But I'm going to cut out of here. Let me give you guys some contact information because I didn't do it on the episode itself. If you want to get in touch with me, if you want to contact me, there's a couple ways to do it. You can send emails to you can go to attitudeofregression@gmail.com. That's where a lot of the emails will go, and I can answer anything you've got there. There is an alternative email if you prefer something a little bit more secure. It's unidentified.records@proton.me. You can send an email there as well. I can get in touch with you there. Please go to the website, attitudeofregression.com. All the episodes are there. On the unidentified history side of the fence, all the historical analysis documents, you can download them, the ones that I've prepared the venture with, excuse me, with ChatGPT. All the documents are there, and you can download those as well. From the standpoint, but everything's there at attitudeofregression.com. The Attitude of Regression Wrestling podcast episodes are there. We got some big events coming up on that side of the fence, including the 11th annual Swaggy Awards. Game Gone Wrong. We just finished that series. You can get caught up and watch not watch all of them. A few of them are on video, but most of them are just audio. But you can get caught up with that. And of course, all the unidentified history episodes and historical analysis documents are there as well. On X, you can follow me at AttitudeAg. That is at AttitudeAGG. And, I would appreciate the follow. You can go to facebook.com/attitude of aggression. Go there, hit the like button. You can go and follow us on Instagram or on Threads. It's at attitude of aggression, all one word. You can check the show out on YouTube. All these episodes are now being videoed as well, so we're developing a presence on YouTube. So yeah, just do a search for Attitude of Aggression on YouTube. You can find the channel. And there's only about 3 or 4 or 5 episodes, a few shorts, that sort of thing. But the episode, this episode here with Sam will be on there. The interview with James Iandoli is on there. The last few episodes of Unidentified History are on the YouTube channel. We are, of course, on Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify. On YouTube, please go ahead, hit the subscribe button because a lot more of this stuff is going to be coming down the pike and you won't want to miss the coverage from 1947. That's going to be really excellent. We got some good people lined up for that. But yeah, go there, subscribe, hit the like button, leave some thoughts, all that fun stuff that will help grow the YouTube channel a little bit on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. If you like what we're doing, please consider leaving us a 5-star review. It really helps us, get the good feedback to know that we're doing something that matters to you guys, and we really appreciate that. So that, I think, is going to do it for all the contact, all the ways you can get a hold of me and harass me if you want to. I'm fine with the harassment. It's all fun. So anyway, that's going to do it for this episode. I really hope you guys enjoyed the interview with Samuel Chong, and make sure you check Sam out on the social media that he provided for you during the episode, and make sure you check out the book and reach out to Sam. Sam can actually help you get a hold of a copy of the book in a different way, not in a pirated way or anything like that, but there are different ways that Sam has a lot of connections to ways to get the book. If you don't want to go to Amazon, that sort of thing, you can get your hands on Thiaoouba Prophecy in other ways. But I would urge you, reach out to Sam. He will probably talk to you because it is obviously something he's very passionate about. He can point you in the right direction as to where you can get your hands on the book in the event you don't want to go through Amazon or something like that. But until next time, guys, keep looking up at the skies, keep looking in the seas, keep looking all around you, because you never know where the phenomenon will be. Until next time, in the next episode of Unidentified History, you guys take care of yourself and stay safe out there. So long.